The coffee machine in Khalid's private suite murmured steadily, releasing ribbons of fragrant steam that drifted through the glass and steel space high above the city. Celeste measured out the grounds with the same practiced precision she'd used for the last 6 months. Precision he expected, precision she delivered, even on the days she desperately wished she didn't. The quasar briefing is printed and on your desk, she said, without turning. She didn't need to. Khalid's presence announced itself the way a storm does. Quiet, slow-moving, impossible to ignore. He never walked like other men. There was no heavy footfall or trailing cologne, only the subtle shift of air as he crossed the room, the faint whisper of tailored fabric moving with lethal intent. You changed the order of the acquisition notes, he said, voice low enough to hum against her spine. Yes, she replied. And before you ask, no, I didn't ask permission. And yes, it was the right call. Behind her, a chair creaked softly. He sat, not relaxed. Khalid never relaxed, but arranged himself in a way that made the massive office suddenly feel smaller, tighter, like the walls bent around his mood. You're unusually bold this morning, he murmured. It's 4 p.m., Mr. Romani, Celeste said, setting his cup on the tray with more force than necessary. Morning was hours ago. She finally turned. There he was, every part of him cut with impossible precision. Black shirt rolled at the sleeves, ink creeping from his wrist to the strong column of his throat. Blonde hair brushed back neatly, expression unreadable, eyes sharp enough to see through bone. Khalid noticed everything. How she tapped her pen when nervous, how she inhaled sharply before delivering bad news, how he affected her, even when she pretended he didn't. Your meeting with the Singh brothers is confirmed for 7, she said, placing the espresso on his desk. Your driver will... I won't need him. Her breath hitched. He rarely deviated from schedule. He hated deviations. Meaning? She asked. He lifted the cup, paused, then looked straight at her. Meaning you're leaving early. His tone wasn't questioning. It was accusing. Celeste steadied herself. Yes, I am. A beat of silence. Then another. Then his fingers tapped the desk once, an irritation signal she'd catalogued months ago. What kind of plans? He asked. Personal ones. The temperature in the room shifted. Not physically, emotionally. A slow, suffocating heat radiated from him. Her pulse kicked. He stood, moving with that controlled, dangerous grace that made people whisper his name long before they understood his world. He circled the desk, stopping directly in front of her. Celeste. Her name sounded like a warning. Answer me. She opened her mouth, then froze. His gaze had dropped, locked onto the deep red fabric visible beneath her coat. His jaw tightened. His pupils narrowed to something dark and unreadable. Where are you going dressed like that? He snapped. Not loud, not explosive, but sharp enough to slice the air between them clean in half. She lifted her chin. You told me I could leave early. And I'm asking, he said, stepping closer, who you're meeting in that dress. His voice wasn't laced with anger. It was laced with something far more dangerous, fear wrapped in possessiveness. For the first time, she didn't retreat. She held her ground, even as the city glowed behind them like a warning. I'll be back tomorrow, she said softly. Khalid stared at her like the answer wasn't enough, like she wasn't his to question, but somehow was. Be careful, he said finally, so quietly she barely caught it. She didn't trust herself to respond. She grabbed her purse, pushed past the magnetic gravity of him, and stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut. Her heart hammered. She didn't know if she had escaped him or if she had just set something unstoppable in motion. And just like that, the night that would change everything began. If you've enjoyed the story so far, tell me where you're watching from in the comment section. I read every comment. Also, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more romantic stories. Now, let's dive right in. The city swallowed her the moment she stepped out of the car. Lights blinking like watchful eyes, traffic humming with an energy that felt too curious, too knowing. Celeste clutched her purse a little tighter, replaying the look on Khalid's face as the elevator doors slid shut. Possessive, controlled, almost afraid. She almost turned back, almost pressed her phone to call him, almost admitted she wasn't going on a date at all. But that would force her to explain everything: the message, the warning, the name attached to it. And if Khalid was right about how dangerous this city was, then telling him might make things worse. So she kept walking, heels tapping along the pavement as if the rhythm alone could drown out her mounting dread. The restaurant was small, low lit, tucked between a luxury boutique and a jewelry store with glass cases that sparkled like tiny cages. When she pushed open the door, the warmth hit her instantly, along with the stares. It was the dress, the deep crimson, the curve-hugging silk, her mistake. She felt every pair of eyes skim over her like heat against her skin. Too much attention, unwanted, unsettling. She forced her shoulders back, exhaling slowly as the host guided her toward a booth in the back. One with a perfect view of the entrance. Good. She needed that. She checked the time. 2 minutes late. No one she recognized. No familiar face from her old neighborhood. No. Celeste. The voice drifted across the table before she even saw him. Elias Romano slid into the booth opposite her with the ease of a man who had never been denied anything in his life. His suit was charcoal, his tie loosened just enough to seem casual. A performance, she realized instantly. Even his smile felt rehearsed. "You look more expensive than I remember," he said, eyes sweeping her dress with a slow appreciation that made her stomach tighten. "Khalid certainly knows how to pick. Stop right there." Her tone snapped like cold metal. "I'm here because you said you had information. Don't make me regret this." His grin sharpened. "Oh, I won't. I imagine Khalid would, though." Her heartbeat skittered. This was already wrong. The way he said Khalid's name, too familiar, too bold. The way he leaned forward, elbows on the table, studying her like she was some rare creature pulled into the open. "How do you know where I work?" she asked. "I make it my business to know things," he replied smoothly, especially when one of the most feared men in this city suddenly grows, attached to his secretary. She inhaled sharply. "Attached? That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Elias tilted his head. "He follows you with his eyes. He clears rooms when you walk in. He hasn't taken a woman to any public function in over 6 months. Everyone's noticed the shift, even if he pretends not to." A pulse beat at the back of her skull. This was a mistake. She should leave. She should. "You said you had something important," she said, gripping the edge of the table. "Say it." That seemed to amuse him. "Straight to business. Fine." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "Khalid isn't who you think he is. He's hiding things. Dangerous things. And by working for him, you've stepped into the crossfire." Her eyes narrowed. You're not telling me anything new. Ah, his smile returned, softer this time. So, he hasn't told you. Told me what? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the far corner of the restaurant, where two men sat pretending to study menus. They weren't eating, they weren't talking. They were watching. Watching her. Celeste felt her stomach drop. Elias, she whispered, suddenly aware of how tight the room felt. What is this? A warning, he murmured. Not all enemies announce themselves with guns and threats. Some simply want the right leverage. His eyes flickered to her dress again. And Khalid, he's given them plenty. A chill rippled down her spine. Why call me here? She asked. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone steadier than she felt. Because you need to understand, Elias said softly. He's the threat, not the victim. And if you stay beside him, you'll end up collateral damage in a war you don't even see coming. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Something in his tone was off, too smooth, too prepared. The men in the corner, the way Elias kept scanning the room, the lingering attention from nearby tables. This wasn't a warning, it was a setup. And as suspicion coiled tight in her chest, Celeste realized one terrifying truth. Someone wasn't just interested in Khalid. They were interested in her, and they weren't done watching. Khalid rarely rode in the back seat of his own car. He preferred to drive. Control was a habit he wore like a tailored suit. But tonight, he sat in the shadows of the rear cabin, watching Celeste's taillights glide through the city like a red thread he wasn't willing to lose. He shouldn't be doing this. He knew it. But when she stepped into that elevator in her red dress, her confidence a shade too brittle, her smile a shade too forced, something inside his chest tightened in a way he couldn't ignore. She wasn't going on a date. He'd known it the moment she lifted her chin too fast, spoke too lightly, lied too easily. Celeste was daring, but she wasn't reckless. Not unless she was afraid. And the way her hands trembled when she straightened her purse strap, that had been fear. Quiet, controlled, hidden under layers of stubbornness. But fear, nonetheless. The kind she never admitted. The kind she thought she could outrun in heels. Kali tapped his thumb against his knee, eyes on the road ahead. Stay 3 cars back, he murmured to the driver. Yes, sir. And keep the men out of sight. They move in only if I say. A small hesitation. Only you, boss? Khalid's jaw flexed. Only me. Jealousy burned hot under his ribs, but fear, real, suffocating fear, cut through it like ice. He replayed every detail of the afternoon in his mind. Her perfume, her loose hair, her tone when she said she had plans. He knew Celeste better than she thought. He knew when she was nervous, when she was lying, when she was hiding something. She had been hiding something today. Something that drew her out into the night wearing a dress that made every predator in the city look twice. Something that made him follow her like a man chained to instinct rather than reason. The car slowed. She had pulled over in front of a small restaurant, warm lights glowing through frosted windows. Not the kind of place someone like Tyler, the stockbroker, would choose. Not the kind of place she'd get dressed up for. Khalid exhaled sharply through his nose. She lied to me. The thought shouldn't have hurt. But somehow, it did. He stepped out of the car, ignoring the coat his driver tried to hand him. The night air was cool against his neck, his breath steady, his anger smooth, not explosive, not loud. A dangerous calm. He watched through the window as Celeste walked inside. Watch the way every face turned toward her. Watch the way she pretended not to notice. His hand moved to the door handle, instinct, but he stopped himself. Not yet. He needed to see who she came to meet. Then he saw him. Elias Romano. A man born from an old Mafia line, the kind that grew like rot in the cracks of the city. Elias was a strategist, a snake with a smile, a man who used charm the way others used knives, quietly, poison-tipped. Khalid's pulse didn't spike. His expression didn't change. But something inside him snapped another inch. Why him? Why tonight? Why Celeste? He stepped closer to the glass, remaining in the dark corner the building's architecture created. He had an unobstructed view of their booth. He could read Celeste's body language like a familiar script. At first, she sat tall, poised. Then Elias leaned forward. She stiffened. Her hand slipped slightly toward her purse. Just a touch. Just enough for someone who knew her to sense she was grounding herself, bracing. Don't show him you're nervous. Khalid's breath fogged the glass. Elias lifted his hand, gesturing in a way that seemed harmless to anyone else. But to Khalid, it was a signal, subtle, directed toward the back of the room. Khalid's eyes flicked that way. Two men, not eating, not speaking, not blinking, watching Celeste. His fingers curled. He wanted to storm through the door, wanted to drag her out by the wrist, wanted to put Elias's head through the polished wood of that table. But years of instinct whispered caution. Wait, watch, confirm the threat. His heart argued. She's in a room full of men who see her as leverage. His pulse beat hard enough to bruise bone. He ordered his men to stay back. Let the predator in him stalk forward alone. He shifted from the window to the entrance, each step measured, silent. His gaze never left Celeste, even from behind glass. He could see her breathing change, small, shallow. She tilted her head just slightly, the way she always did when she was calculating whether to stay or flee. Khalid knew that look. He'd watched her make that same face over spreadsheets, over uncomfortable meetings, over lies she didn't want to tell him. But this time, fear threaded through it. Elias leaned back, smirking. Celeste's fingers curled around her purse strap, white-knuckled. A lifeline? That was it. Khalid reached for the door, muscles coiled, every nerve on alert. Then the entire building flickered. Lights dimmed, buzzed, shuddered, and went out. For half a second, the city swallowed the restaurant in darkness. Khalid didn't hesitate. He pushed the door open. Because Celeste, his Celeste, was in the dark with men who wanted to use her. And he was done watching from the shadows. Darkness wasn't supposed to have a sound, yet this one did. A low hum, a shift of air, the sudden scrape of a chair. Celeste felt every hair on her arms lift as the restaurant sank into pitch-black silence, thick, suffocating, unnatural. Her fingers clutched the purse strap, the leather cutting into her palm. "Relax," Elias murmured somewhere in front of her. His voice was no longer charming, no longer smooth. It had shed its polite mask and revealed something cold beneath it. This was inevitable. Her breath hitched. "What did you do?" "Don't be dramatic. Power outages happen." His shoes scraped as he stood. "Besides, it's time we stop pretending." A chill crawled up her spine. "You're going to leave Khalid," Elias said, "and you're going to help us get access to his office, his accounts, his roots, whatever you know." Her pulse surged. "I'm not betraying him." "You already are," he replied softly, "just by being here." "What does that mean?" A mocking sigh. You didn't come here for romance, Celeste. You came because you were worried, because you suspected something was happening behind the scenes. You're loyal, and that makes you predictable. And predictable people are easy to manipulate. Her stomach dropped. You tricked me. Of course I did. His tone sharpened. Did you really think someone like me calls a meeting without a plan? A rustle near the door made Celeste's blood freeze. Two silhouettes blocked the exit. She could hear their weight shift, boots scraping the floor. Another figure moved toward the window, dragging something heavy. A board? A curtain? Something meant to seal them in. She swallowed hard. What do you want with me? Insurance, Elias said simply. Khalid's building an empire too big for the rest of us to ignore. But every empire has a weak point, and his just happens to wear red. Her breath stuttered out. You don't know anything about him. I know enough. Elias stepped closer, voice inches from her face. And I know you care about him. That makes you useful. She felt him reach for her wrist. No, don't touch me. She jerked away, knocking into the table. A glass shattered near her feet. She stumbled back blindly, heart pounding so hard she felt it in her teeth. Something was wrong. Not just the men, not just Elias. The whole restaurant had shifted. The soft murmur of diners had vanished. The owner, the servers, the couple near the corner, gone, cleared out, like they'd been warned. Like they knew what was coming. Fear curled tight in her chest. Sit down, Celeste, Elias said, voice turning steel, before this becomes unpleasant. I'm not helping you. Her voice shook, but her words didn't. A beat of silence. Then Elias exhaled sharply. Fine. Then we'll do this the... A gunshot cracked through the darkness. Celeste screamed, dropping to her knees as sound tore the air apart. The shot ricocheted off the walls, hot and violent. A heavy thud followed, someone hitting the ground. Another moment of dead silence. Then a voice cut through the dark, low, controlled, deadly. Celeste, come to me. Her breath caught. Khalid. Khalid, she whispered, trembling. Keep your head down, he commanded softly. Stay low. The tone wasn't loud, but it carried, like a blade gliding through smoke. A rush of movement erupted around her, boots scraping, bodies shifting in panic. Someone cursed under their breath. Another gun cocked. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. Celeste dropped onto her hands, crawling blindly across the floor. Her knees scraped tile. Her fingers brushed broken glass. Someone lunged nearby, their heel nearly stomping her hand. She flinched back. Then, a body flew across the room. A chair crashed. A grunt cut through the mayhem. Khalid. He moved like he wasn't human. Silent, efficient, terrifyingly precise. She heard someone swing a weapon, and the sharp crack of Khalid's arm blocking it. A choked scream, a bone snapping. Another body hit the floor. Khalid, where? Celeste gasped, voice breaking. Here. His voice was closer now, just inches away. Give me your hand. She reached into the dark, heart in her throat. Warm fingers closed around hers. Firm, certain, unshakable. She almost collapsed with relief. He pulled her against him, shielding her with his body as someone rushed them from behind. Khalid spun, yanking her with him, and something heavy slammed into a table instead of her back. A man groaned. Khalid didn't hesitate. His elbow dropped, and the groan went silent. Khalid, she whispered, shaking. Elias. I know. His arm wrapped around her waist, tightening. "Stay with me." She nodded, even though she doubted he could see it. The darkness pressed around them like a living creature. A final scuffle broke out near the entrance. The sound of fists, the wet thud of impact. A gasp cut short. Then, silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Celeste clung to Khalid's hand as her breathing trembled out in ragged bursts. His chest rose and fell steadily. No panic, no hesitation. Only lethal focus simmering beneath the surface. After several seconds, he spoke against her ear, voice steady as stone. "It's over." Her pulse still thundered. "Is it?" He didn't answer. Because right then, the emergency lights flickered, buzzed, and snapped on. White light flooded the room, tables overturned, chairs broken. 3 unconscious men sprawled across the floor. But Elias, Elias was gone, vanished, like a ghost who had slipped between the cracks. Khalid's grip tightened around Celeste's waist. He didn't take his eyes off the empty booth where Elias had been sitting. And in the harsh glow of the emergency lights, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't over. Not even close. The emergency lights were still buzzing when Khalid pulled her through the shattered restaurant doorway and into the quiet night. Cool air slammed into Celeste's lungs, sharp and cleansing, but her knees wobbled beneath her. The world outside felt too normal. Cars passing, neon signs glowing, the soft hum of traffic, like the city had no idea what had just erupted inside those darkened walls. Kali didn't release her hand, not even when they reached the sidewalk, not even when she tried to catch her breath. His grip wasn't harsh. It was desperate. "Khalid," she whispered. He didn't turn, didn't blink. His jaw flexed as he stared straight ahead, chest rising and falling with slow, measured breaths that failed to mask the storm under his skin. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, tight. Something pulled past the breaking point. "How long," he asked, "were you planning to face things like this alone?" Celeste's stomach twisted. So that was the root. Not fury, not wounded pride. Fear. "I didn't plan anything," she murmured. "I didn't know it was a trap." He turned then, abrupt, sharp. His eyes burned. "But you did know someone was coming for me." Her silence answered for her. "You came here without telling me." His voice cracked on the last word, barely audible. "You walked into danger alone." "You follow me everywhere? You know everything I do now," she shot back, her voice trembling. "Is that the plan?" "No," he snapped. "The plan was for you to be safe." He dragged a hand through his hair, breathing hard. The control he wore like armor was fraying. She could see the cracks. "You could have died tonight," he said, quietly. "Do you understand that?" She stepped forward before she had time to think. Anger bubbling up through fear. "And what about you?" she demanded. "You take risks constantly, more than anyone I've ever met." He stiffened. She didn't stop. "You walk into danger like you're immune to it. You pick fights with men who would love nothing more than to put a bullet in your head. You protect everyone else, your associates, your business, your empire, like none of it can touch you." She swallowed hard, voice breaking. "So who protects you, Khalid? Who looks out for you?" The night went silent. A breeze drifted between them, carrying the faint scent of the ocean and the distant honking of cabs, but none of it breached the stillness that locked Khalid in place. Her question had hit him somewhere deep, somewhere old, somewhere scarred. His eyes softened, just barely, but enough for her to see something raw flicker through the cracks. Nobody, he said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't tragic. It was simply true. And it shook her. Khalid, she whispered, her voice gentler now, something warm wrapping around her ribs. He exhaled slowly, a sound between surrender and restraint, and stepped closer. The city lights reflected against his dark eyes, turning them molten. His hand lifted, hesitant at first, before cupping her jaw with a tenderness that contradicted everything she knew about the man. He brushed his thumb across her cheek, tracing the faint tremor in her breathing. I thought I had lost you tonight, he said. The admission was softer than anything he'd ever said to her, almost fragile. Celeste's heart rattled, loud in her chest. Her breath stuttered as he leaned in, closing the space between them inch by inch. His forehead almost touched hers. His lips hovered a breath away from her own. Heat rolled through her. The kind that had been building for 6 long months. The kind neither of them had dared release. His hand slid to the back of her neck. Celeste, he whispered, voice shaking. She tilted forward instinctively, drawn to him like gravity had finally snapped its hold. And then he froze. Every muscle locked. His breath hitched. His hand trembled. For a heartbeat, she saw everything he wanted and everything he had been holding back. Need, fear, hunger, devotion. But then he closed his eyes, jaw clenching hard, and pulled away. Not gently, not slowly, like he'd wrenched himself out of danger. We can't, he whispered, voice rough. Her chest tightened. Khalid. He stepped back again, farther this time. Distance, a shield. Control sliding back into place piece by painful piece. His expression hardened, not cold, not cruel, but disciplined, wounded, like wanting her was the one thing he couldn't allow himself to fail at. Get in the car, Celeste. The words were soft, but final. A quiet command laced with the faintest tremor. She stared at him, at the rigid shoulders, the set jaw, the fists he kept clenching as though he couldn't bear not touching her. He wasn't rejecting her. He was afraid of what he would do if he didn't stop. Slowly, she nodded. He opened the car door for her, not meeting her eyes. Not even when her hand brushed his as she slid into the back seat. Silence wrapped around them both. Khalid closed the door gently, then moved to the opposite side and climbed in. His driver remained still, waiting, sensing the tension in the air like a storm about to break. But Khalid didn't speak. Neither did Celeste. As the car pulled away from the curb, the city lights smeared across the windows, turning the world outside into streaks of neon and night. They sat close enough to touch, close enough to feel the warmth of each other's breath. But a chasm of unspoken emotion stretched between them, heavy and electric. And in that thick, hovering quiet, something new settled in the space they shared. A dangerous understanding. A turning point neither of them could undo. The air felt different, charged, alive. Whatever they were before, they would never be again. The drive to Khalid's penthouse felt endless, silent, heavy, pulsing with the ghost of a kiss that almost happened. Celeste sat with her hands clasped in her lap, knuckles white against the faint glow of the city lights leaking through the tinted windows. Khalid sat beside her, angled slightly away, staring out of the window like the skyline could anchor him. It didn't. His jaw tightened every time the car hit a bump. His fingers drummed once against his thigh, a barely there tell that he was unraveling on the inside. When they finally pulled into the private underground entrance, neither of them moved at first. The hum of the engine filled the silence. The aftershocks of adrenaline tapped beneath their skin. Khalid exhaled slowly, then opened his door. "Come upstairs," he said quietly. Not a command, not a request. Something in between, something raw. Celeste followed him out of the car. No guards flanked the elevator door. No men trailed behind them. The hallway to the penthouse was empty. Just them. When they stepped inside, the door shut with a soft click, sealing them into the vast, dimly lit space. A kingdom of glass and shadows. The city stretched endlessly below, skyscrapers glowing like a constellation built by men. Khalid shrugged off his jacket and tossed it carelessly on the couch, something he never did. Then he turned toward her with an expression she had never seen on his face. Not anger, not control. Something far more dangerous. "Sit," he murmured. Her legs were trembling, so she obeyed. She sank onto the edge of the sofa, hands still clasped, throat tight with a mix of fear and anticipation. Khalid didn't sit. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out like he was searching for the words in the city below. "What Elias wanted," he said finally, voice low, "was leverage." Celeste's breath caught. "He wanted to use me?" she whispered. His shoulders tensed. "No. He wanted to use you against me." She blinked, hard. "Why me?" Khalid turned then, slowly, as if he could only manage the movement by force of will. When his eyes met hers, something inside her chest jolted. "Because they know." His voice was sanded down to its bare, vulnerable truth. "They know. I care about you." Celeste's heart stuttered sharply. She had expected explanation. Maybe anger. Maybe warnings. Not this. "Khalid," she whispered, but he lifted a hand, stopping her. "You need to hear all of it," he said softly. He moved closer, not sitting, just standing before her, pacing slowly like a man unraveling threads he kept hidden for years. "I noticed you the day you walked in," he murmured. "Not because you were beautiful, though you were, but because you walked into a room full of men twice your size, half of them dangerous, and you didn't flinch." Her breath hitched. "You corrected a mistake on the Rossi contracts before you even finished orientation. You told my head of finance he'd miscalculated a figure he'd sworn was correct." A faint ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No one talks to him like that." Celeste felt heat rise behind her ribs. Embarrassment, disbelief, something warm and dizzying. "You think I haven't noticed you," he said, "but I always notice you." Her pulse pounded in her ears. "I notice when you smile during meetings. I look for it, especially when things turn tense." He swallowed. "It keeps me grounded." Her hands trembled. "I listen for your footsteps in the mornings. I know the sound of your heels. I know when you're tired, when you're nervous, when you're angry at me." Her throat tightened painfully. "I know your habits," he murmured. "The way you twist your ring when you're thinking. The way you tap your pen when you're anxious. The way your breath stutters when you're trying not to cry." Emotion rose in her, like a tide she couldn't fight. "Khalid," she breathed. He shook his head, stepping closer, slow, controlled, but with an urgency simmering beneath. "And tonight," he said quietly, "when you left the office without looking at me, I knew something was wrong." Celeste pressed a hand to her chest, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I didn't want to drag you into anything." He let out a rough, humorless laugh. "You don't drag me into things, Celeste." You are the only thing I walk toward willingly." The confession struck through her like lightning. She stood, without realizing she'd moved, her breath shaking as she faced him fully. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. For the first time, he hesitated. Then he stepped close enough that his breath brushed her cheek, close enough that the warmth of him seeped through her bones. "Because tonight," he said, his voice dropping into something raw and fragile, "proved what they've already figured out." Her pulse roared. "That you're not just my secretary," he whispered. "You're my weakness." Her lungs froze, and my enemies know it. The room swayed slightly. Celeste gripped the edge of the sofa to steady herself. "Khalid," she tried again, but her voice cracked. He lifted a hand, tentative, hesitant, and touched the side of her jaw. His thumb brushed her skin in a way that felt like both apology and confession. His eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that stripped her bare. "You don't understand," he said softly, voice breaking in the space between them. "If anything happened to you," he swallowed hard, "I wouldn't survive it." The word sank into her, warm and devastating. Her breath left her in a trembling exhale as the distance between them disappeared. Emotion humming in the air like a live wire. And in the quiet of his penthouse, above a city that didn't know their names, everything between them changed. Morning arrived without mercy. Pale sunlight crept between the penthouse curtains, brushing over Celeste's face and waking her with a slow ache in her chest. Her body was still humming with everything Khalid had confessed. Every word, every truth. Every piece of him she never imagined he'd reveal. But when she sat up, the warmth of last night was gone. The room felt colder, still, empty. She found him in his office. Khalid stood with his back to the city, shoulders rigid, jaw tight, his phone pressed to his ear. The soft glow of dawn framed him like a dark silhouette. No longer the man whispering confessions in low, trembling breaths. This was Khalid, the boss, the ruler, the calm before a blood-soaked storm. His voice was ice. "I don't care what it costs. Find him." A pause. "No, not the man Elias hired." Another pause, this one longer, heavier. "Him. I want Elias." He ended the call. Celeste watched from the doorway, heart twisting. Gone was the tenderness from last night, replaced instead by a cold, lethal focus that radiated off him like heat from a forge. "Khalid?" she whispered. He didn't turn at first. His hands braced against the edge of his desk, his head bowed slightly. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm, but carved from concrete. "They leaked it." Her stomach dropped. "Who?" "The Romano family." He straightened, eyes burning as he finally met her gaze. "They leaked the attack. Told the entire underground I was blindsided. That someone got to you. That I panicked." He spat the word like it tasted wrong. "They're using you to undermine me." Celeste's breath hitched. Why would they do that? Because desperation breeds opportunity. Khalid stepped toward her, each movement controlled, precise. "They think if they weaken me, I'll make mistakes. Big ones." Her pulse pounded. "Khalid, you didn't panic." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the storm building behind his eyes. "Yes," he murmured, "I did." The admission was soft, but the weight of it felt like the whole city shifted beneath them. He turned away abruptly, as if the honesty burned him. He pulled on his suit jacket, the fabric snapping sharply into place, transforming him even further into the powerful, untouchable man the world feared. His softer edges, the ones he showed her, locked themselves behind invisible armor. "Khalid," she said gently, stepping toward him, "what are you going to do?" He stilled. Then he reached for his phone. Celeste felt the air tighten as he dialed a number. "This is Khalid," he said to whoever answered. "Emergency meeting, 1 hour." He hung up, dialed another, another. Each call was quick, purposeful, final. She had only seen him like this twice before. Once when one of his men was kidnapped, and once when a rival attempted to breach his shipment port. But now, this was different. This was personal. He slipped his watch on, brushing past her with the intensity of a man who had already made a decision that could not be undone. Celeste grabbed his wrist before she could second-guess herself. "Khalid, stop. Talk to me." His body froze. Slowly, he turned his head, looking down at her hand around his wrist, like the touch was both salvation and sin. "Celeste," he said quietly, "if I talk to you right now, I won't leave this room." Her breath caught. She loosened her grip, but he didn't pull away. He reached for her instead, his hand covering hers briefly, just long enough for warmth to bloom between them, before he stepped back. The moment shattered when his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. His expression turned to stone. "They're threatening more," he said. Her heart lurched. "What does that mean?" "It means," he answered, slipping the phone into his pocket, "they think last night was only the beginning." Before she could speak, his voice hardened, colder than she'd ever heard it. "This ends now." He crossed the room in long, commanding strides, opening a hidden panel in the wall that revealed a secure communication console. Lines that connected directly to the leaders of every major criminal organization in the city. Celeste remained still, watching as he lifted the microphone. "Khalid," she whispered, fear curling around her throat. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done the moment I realized they were coming for you." He pressed a button. A tone sounded, sharp and metallic. Every underworld channel in the city was now listening. His voice was calm, controlled, deadly. "This is Khalid Al-Rashid." He paused, the silence crackling with tension. "A message to every family, every faction, every alliance." He exhaled slowly. "Anyone who touches Celeste dies." The statement echoed through the room like a gunshot. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The threat was absolute. Celeste felt the impact ripple through her chest. The criminal world would feel it 10 times stronger. Khalid set the microphone down with terrifying precision and turned back to her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were fire. "It's done." "Khalid," she whispered, stepping forward. But he held up a hand, gentle, warning. "I know what you're going to say," he murmured. But they needed to hear it, all of them. "Do you understand what you just started?" "Yes." He met her gaze without hesitation. "A war." The word trembled through her. Khalid closed the distance between them until he was right in front of her, towering, burning, both too close and not close enough. "I will not lose you," he whispered. "Not to them, not to anyone." The conviction in his voice was almost unbearable. And in that moment, Celeste understood, really understood, the cost of being loved by a man like him. A man feared by empires. A man whose enemies watched his every move. A man who had just told the entire underworld that his heart had a name. Her name. She stood in the doorway as he pulled on his coat and gathered his men, quiet footsteps echoing in the hall. She didn't call out. She didn't stop him. But as he walked away, intent on war, she felt a quiet truth settle into her chest like a stone. Loving him meant becoming the line no enemy could cross. Loving him meant she was no longer standing on safe ground. She was standing on the fault line. And if it broke, everything would fall with it. The penthouse was too quiet when Khalid returned. Not the calm quiet of early morning or the peaceful hush that followed his softer moments. This was the brittle, suffocating silence of a man sharpening the distance between himself and the one person who could break him. Celeste felt it the moment he stepped through the door. He didn't look at her, not fully. His gaze slid past her like he was afraid that meeting her eyes would unravel the last thread holding him together. He pulled off his coat, draped it over the armchair with mechanical precision, and walked deeper into the room, as if he needed space. Space from her, from himself, from the war he'd just declared. "Khalid," she whispered, stepping toward him. "Pack a bag." The words were sharp, sudden, unyielding. She froze. "What?" He didn't turn around. "I've arranged a plane. It leaves in an hour." Her heartbeat stumbled. "A plane?" "Switzerland. You'll stay in a private chalet until this is over." Over. As if that word meant anything in his world. "Khalid, you're leaving tonight," he said, voice low, voice controlled. "My men will escort you." It wasn't just an order. It was resignation. It was fear. It was the sound of a man severing the only soft part of his life to protect it. Celeste stood there, stunned, watching the tension tight across his shoulders, watching him brace himself against the glass wall overlooking the city, 2 floors above the clouds, the place where everything started. "Khalid," she breathed, stepping closer. "Look at me." He didn't. "Look at me," she repeated, firmer this time. Slowly, painfully, he turned. His eyes were different, harder, brighter, full of a desperation he was trying to smother beneath logic and strategy. "You're not safe here," he said quietly. "Not anymore. They'll come for you again, and next time I might not." He broke off, jaw clenching. "Khalid, I'm not leaving." "You are." His voice cracked like a command cutting through smoke. "Celeste, you don't understand the world I'm about to drag you into." "I'm already in it." He stepped forward sharply, eyes flashing. "Not like this." "Exactly like this." Frustration flared across his face, frustration rooted in fear, not anger. "You deserve a life untouched by blood," he said, softer now, almost pleading. "Untouched by violence, by men like Elias, by men like me. But I don't want a life without you." The words slipped out, raw and unfiltered. Khalid inhaled sharply, as if she'd hit him with something heavier than a weapon. She was trembling. Fear, adrenaline, love, all tangled together. But she didn't back away. She walked to the same doorway where she'd stood 6 months ago on her very first day. The same spot he always noticed her from. The same threshold between their worlds. 2 floors above the clouds. The place where she first felt the weight of his gaze. She planted herself there and lifted her chin. "You saved my life," she said, voice steady. "So you don't get to push me out of yours." For the first time since he walked in, Khalid stopped breathing. His facade, his armor, his reputation, his ruthless composure cracked. Not all at once, just enough for Celeste to see the man underneath. The man who followed her into the night. The man who whispered fear into her hair. The man who admitted he wouldn't survive losing her. He stared at her like she was something sacred he had no right to touch. "Celeste." His voice dropped into something reverent. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, she whispered. I do. Kali took one step toward her, then another, each slow movement deliberate, like he was approaching something fragile. I'm not afraid of your enemies, she said. You should be. His hand lifted slightly, like he wanted to touch her, but didn't dare. I've killed men for less than what Elias did. I know. I've destroyed entire families for threats far smaller than this. I know. And I would do worse, he whispered, if someone laid a hand on you. Her heartbeat hammered, but she didn't flinch. She didn't look away. I'm not afraid of you, she murmured. That broke him. A breath escaped him, shaken, unsteady. His eyes closed briefly, as though the words knocked the air from his lungs. When he opened them again, something inside him had shifted. It wasn't anger, or dominance, or possession. It was vulnerability, bare, unmistakable. Celeste, he said, voice stripped raw, I can't lose you. Then stop trying to send me away. He swallowed hard, fighting a war inside himself. Duty versus emotion, fear versus desire, the leader versus the man. Then finally, his control slipped. He reached out, slowly, and touched her jaw with the lightest brush of his fingers. A touch that felt like a vow, all on its own. Celeste leaned into it, letting her eyes fall closed for a breath. When she opened them again, she saw her future in his eyes. Not safe, not simple, but theirs. She lifted her hand and covered his, anchoring him. Then whatever comes next, she whispered. We face together. Khalid's breath trembled. His forehead touched hers, their breaths mingling in the quiet between them. And in that moment, above the clouds, with the city trembling beneath their feet, Khalid Al-Rashid let the world fall away, long enough to let her in. The war was coming, but for the first time, they stood on the same side of it. The next 48 hours felt like the breath a city holds before a storm. Every corner of the underworld buzzed with speculation. Every rival organization went silent, watching, waiting, calculating. The Romano family, humiliated, exposed, furious, pulled their soldiers off the streets and into the shadows, not to retreat, but to reload. Khalid felt the shift in the air, the way predators sense a coming hunt. But for the first time in years, he wasn't preparing alone. Celeste was there, not as a pawn, not as a bargaining chip, not as the secretary who handed him schedules and coffee. She was beside him, watching him handle calls with the same lethal calm that made men twice his size tremble, listening as his lieutenants briefed him on the Romano movements, standing with him while alliances shifted, strained, reformed under pressure. No one commented on her presence. They wouldn't dare. Not after what he'd said. Anyone who touches Celeste dies. The message echoed across the city and settled like smoke into every whispered conversation. Celeste heard it repeated by his men in hallways, heard it murmured by allies calling to pledge loyalty, heard it invoked like a vow, a threat, a promise. But only she knew the truth behind it. Khalid wasn't protecting a possession. He was protecting his heart, and that made him more dangerous than any of them had ever seen. By the third night, the penthouse felt like the still point of a spinning world, quiet, dim, suspended in tension. The city lights glittered beneath the windows like a carpet of fire. Khalid stood in front of the glass, shoulders tense, jaw rigid. From behind him, Celeste could see the reflection of a man who built empires and destroyed dynasties, but who now feared losing someone more than losing power. She stepped to his side without a word. He didn't look at her at first. His eyes stayed on the skyline, scanning the horizon the way a wolf monitors territory. "Elias has gone underground," he said finally. Celeste nodded. "He'll resurface." "Yes. And when he does?" Khalid exhaled slowly. "I'll be ready." The old Khalid, the cold, calculating boss, would have added, "And I'll end him." But tonight, his tone carried something softer, something newly heavy. "Your enemies won't stop just because we want a quiet life," Celeste murmured. "My enemies," he corrected gently. "Not yours." She turned, studying his profile, the hard lines, the shadowed angles, the subtle vulnerability he never let others see. "You know that's not true anymore." He finally looked at her. One long, quiet stare, deep, searching, unsettled. "Celeste," his voice dropped. "You shouldn't be part of this." "But I am." He shook his head once, slow, pained. "You deserve safety, a future untouched by violence." She took a step closer. "A future without you is not safety." The tension between them shifted, warped into something almost unbearable. Khalid's throat worked as he swallowed, his chest rising slowly, with breath he didn't release right away. "You don't understand what this means," he whispered. "I do. You don't understand what loving me costs. I'm already paying it." Khalid's eyes softened, darkened. A rare look, one that stripped away the boss, the ruler, the feared name whispered in alleyways. In its place was a man standing on the edge of surrender. He reached out cautiously, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. His knuckles lingered against her cheek. "Celeste," he breathed, and her name in his mouth sounded like a confession. Her pulse fluttered. "Say what you're afraid to." His hand slid to her waist, tentative and reverent, drawing her closer until the city lights painted fire along the edges of their silhouettes. "You were the one thing in my life I couldn't control," he said quietly, "and the only thing I didn't want to." The words broke something open inside her. Not fear, not doubt, but a fierce, grounding certainty. She placed her palm on his chest, over the steady, thunderous beat beneath his ribs. "Then let me stay. Let me be here, with you." His eyes closed, as if the relief was too much. He leaned his forehead against hers, breath warm, touch gentle in a way that felt dangerously intimate. "You're changing everything," he murmured. "Good," she whispered. "You needed something to." His laugh was silent, more air than sound, but real. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her fully against him, holding her like someone terrified of ever letting go again. The city glowed beneath them, unaware of the war brewing, the lines being redrawn, the alliances shifting. But in the quiet of Khalid's penthouse, the real shift happened in a single embrace. Celeste had become more than a weakness, more than a target, more than a complication. She had become the axis of his world, a future he didn't know he wanted until it stood in front of him wearing a red dress. Minutes passed in silence, heavy, warm, grounding. When he finally spoke again, his voice was roughened by emotion he couldn't mask. "This war is coming," he said, "and it will be brutal. I'm not leaving." His arms tightened around her. "You should, but I won't." He let out a long, slow breath, defeat and devotion woven together. He lowered his lips to her temple, his voice sinking into her skin like a vow. "Wherever you go," Khalid whispered into her hair, "I'm going with you." And in that quiet moment, 2 floors above the clouds, together in the dark, They sealed their first promise as something more than allies, as something unbreakable.